Good day, everyone. Charles Wilson here from the DC Democratic Party. I want to welcome you to Statehood Speaks, the Democratic Party's podcast, where we talk to local and national Democrats about why they are Democrats and what issues are important to them. We're excited today that our special guest is none other than the council member from the Great Ward 5 here in Washington, D.C., Councilmember Zachary Parker. Councilmember, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So let's go and get into it. We like to ask our guests the same question. Why are you a Democrat?
Democrat because out of our party structures and the options available to me, Democrats from my lifetime have been those on the right side of history for matters of civil rights, workers' rights, LGBTQ rights, and the list goes on. Also, it's a party that I believe still is for the working class and the little guy. I consider myself a poverty abolitionist. That is a phrase coined by Desmond Matthew. And it's this idea that we can and we should eliminate poverty. And I think the parties have a lot of work to do, but out of the two presented to us, Democrats have far exceeded the Republican Party in trying to rid.
Great. So you're still in your first term. What keeps you motivated every day to wake up in the morning and drive down to the Wilson Building and do the work of the people?
Yeah, I laughed a little bit because while it's still my first term, it's feeling like an eternity because there's so many challenges confronting the district, and with new federal partners, it feels like there's a new dilemma every day. What keeps me invested in this work is knowing that I'm making a difference, knowing that we have the power to change people's lives for the better, and we can see the impact of the work that we're leading here on the council, whether that was passing an extension for SNAP benefits, literally helping tens of thousands of residents make ends meet, or passing a child tax credit that will raise the economic floor for so many families, or opening what will be a world-class hospital east of the river. The work that we're doing here on the council is changing people's lives. And that is enough, despite all of the craziness, to come here every day and work in my heart.
Awesome. I saw on social media the other day that you guys, the entire council, was down on the Hill. For the folks who aren't necessarily tuned in and what's going on, why did you guys make that field trip, and what was the outcome of it?
I mean, first, the issue. So, as you know, ahead of Friday's deadline, Republicans are putting forth a budget resolution to keep the government open. This is what we ought to do because we should pay our bills as a country. That said, the congressional Republicans are proposing draconian cuts across federal agencies, all in the spirit of saving money. And they are treating the district as if it were a federal agency. That has not been done in 20 plus years. There is language embedded in these resolutions that would hold DC harmless. And what is being proposed would amount to $1.1 billion of local funds that would be cut for the district. And I stress local funds because these are not federal dollars. It would not amount to federal savings. Literally, they would sit in a bank account that we wouldn't be able to touch. And what that translates to is the need to fire hundreds of officers and teachers and firefighters and shutter programs and reduce services to account for $1 billion with 6 months left in this fiscal year. It is draconian, it is unnecessary, it is harmful. My colleagues and I went down to the Hill to make the case of the need to support Congresswoman Norton's amendment. Unfortunately, yesterday in the committee, the Rules Committee, that amendment was not successful, but there is still time. I am sending out a message. I know many of my colleagues are sending out messages to residents to call on senators, both Democratic and Republican, asking them to right this wrong. They can do that by an amendment. We have the language that Congresswoman Norton put forward that would hold the district harmless. Last thing I would say, what we are facing as a city, we are often treated as a city and operating as a state. Hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion over the financial plan that is being reduced because of the callousness by which the federal workforce has been reduced. On top of that, with these cuts, what we are fearing are services going unmatched and many people's lives being ruined. And so that is why we were on the Hill. We are asking residents to join forces with us, and I'm still hopeful before Friday we can make a difference.
I appreciate you sharing that information. On the same note, with our new federal partners who have taken a great interest in the district, can you talk a little bit about the ongoing threats regarding DC's autonomy and where you see we are in the whole DC statehood movement?
Yeah, so we just celebrated 50 years of home rule, and it is worth saying we cherish home rule, but we are not satisfied with it. DC has the burden of citizenship without the privileges of citizenship, meaning we pay our taxes. We run a well run city where we are balancing our budget. We have world class institutions here. At the same time, we are seeing the consequences of DC not being a state. The threat from the federal government under the leadership of congressional Republicans and Elon Musk is enormous. We are seeing that as it relates to our budget, but we could see that from everything from our schools and our education policy to public safety. If we are not granted the right to govern for ourselves, we literally will be at the whim of congressional Republicans who do not have the responsibility to the district, that don't live here, and some would say that many want to treat the district as a laboratory for some of Republicans' most extreme policies. I like to look at things in the optimistic side of, and I would just say this is an opportunity for us, all 700 plus thousand district residents, to come together with a single message that we should be able to chart our own path forward as we continue to fight for statehood. As I mentioned, we run a well operated city, and we need to band together at this time like never before with a singular message to ensure that we can stave off the attacks that are likely to continue to come.
I appreciate you sharing that. What do you think? What do you think is the most effective strategy now for us to really push for DC statehood?
Yeah, I'll answer this in two ways. One, I think by and large, Democrats need to be more bold in this moment. We are witnessing a party and a president that has no problem coloring outside of the lines, that are willing to confront normalcy and the rules and the playbook. And so I think Democrats need to match that energy in a lot of ways. In terms of defending home rule, I think we need to make the case to the country. I still believe that most Americans, if they fully understood what was at stake for the district and what that means for their own cities and states, they would side with us. But a lot of people just simply don't understand the cause of DC statehood. In fact, there was a family on the Hill yesterday that I ran into from South Carolina. They were visiting. They were saying, well, what are you all protesting about? By the time we were done, they fully understood what we were talking about. And the mom said, well, I had heard about DC statehood and I wasn't supportive before, but that 5 minute conversation seemed to kind of change her mind. I think we need to keep educating people while fighting in a very bold way. And by when I say bold, I mean taking it to Republicans, going on the airwaves, going on Fox News, confronting them and pointing out the ways in which what they are proposing, in many respects, is dangerous. It's antithetical to the democratic values that we hold near and dear. It certainly confronts what they pretend and we all agree this country was built on, although we still have a lot of work to achieve. And so I think as a party, we just have to be more vocal and more bold.
Thank you. I agree with you. I think public education is key to advancing this whole cause.
And at some point, we will have to take to the streets.
Yes.
Not to be, and I'm not inciting violence, but through peaceful protest, at some point, all 700 plus thousand district residents should be prepared to defend home rule, even if that means standing in the streets, making our case, calling on our government to respond. And right now, we are trying to do everything we can through policy to stave off that moment. But I continue to believe the power has always been and will always be with the people.
Thank you. So let's get back locally. What are you working on now?
So much so, I was very proud last year to introduce the child tax credit. It is the first of its kind here in the district. And when it was implemented at the federal level at the height of the pandemic, the federal child tax credit slashed poverty rates in half. I say it has been the single most effective anti-poverty program this country has implemented in more than 50 years. And so last year, I was very proud that we were able to establish our very own district child tax credit. I am working through this budget, despite all of the distractions that we're facing to expand that child tax credit. I'm also working with colleagues to tackle our truancy issues. In fact, I was meeting today with the chairman. We know that a significant number of our young people are missing too many days of school. That is not only a consequence of whatever is happening in their homes and communities, but it's also because our system is literally allowing young people to fall through the cracks. And so later this year, I hope to have additional legislation to address our truancy issue in the district. I would say last year I introduced legislation that would transfer the follow up for truancy to DHS from CFSA. CFSA being our Child Family Services Agency, DHS being the Department of Human Services, for two very reasons. One, it means something very different when DHS comes and knocks on your door to say why your child is not showing up to school than CFSA. But also, we know that we need to do something different. And right now, there's a pilot underway that we were able to fund in last year's budget that is exploring how DHS may follow up with a family. Last thing I would say, it is top of mind for me that residents in the district are struggling to meet their basic needs. For the first time in a long time, poverty rates are increasing. We know rents are increasing, mortgage rates are high, home values are high. And so I am laser focused around how do we continue to expand food access and make sure that those who have long called the district home can stay here. And so I look forward to sharing more updates soon.
Thank you. You mentioned truancy, the
Yeah.
truancy rate being really high. That's been an issue in the district for a long time. Why do you think it's so high?
I mean, I'll be blunt with you. I think our system is not holding young people or their families accountable. And when I say accountable, I'm not saying let's lock parents up, let's lock young people up. I'm saying accountable to say you have to go to school and here are the ways that we're going to support you to get there. I also think young people would go to school more readily if they were being well served in school, if the school environment was one that was welcoming and safe and nurturing for them. And so I think we have work to do on the school side of things to make sure that we are meeting all of our young people's needs, especially those with learning disabilities. But at the same time, our system needs to follow up with families and hold them accountable to ensuring that our young people are actually showing up. I'll give you two stats. Well, last year, that over 3,000 referrals were made to CFSA. CFSA is the agency that is meant to do the initial follow up and investigative work for children ages 13 and below. Out of 3,000 plus,
3,000?
say that again? 3,000 plus refer, so more than 3,000. And CFSA followed up with roughly 200 of those families. They would argue they screened out the vast majority of those cases. When you ask, all right, so what happens with the rest of those families? It's clear that not much is happening. For children or young people 13 and older, those cases are referred to court social services. We know thousands of high schoolers missed school last year. Yet, in an oversight hearing last week, the Attorney General said only 608 referrals were made from court social services to the Office of the Attorney General. There's a disconnect here. And we are not serving our young people well, both in the school environment, but also following up to ensure that they show up. I know when I was growing up, there was a fear that I had. If I did not show up to school, there was going to be some sort of consequence, and I didn't want to figure that out. Again, I'm not advocating for locking families up. Research is really clear that is not the best way and path. At the same time, we have to do better than what we're currently doing.
Great, thanks for sharing. Let's talk about youth violence and public safety. It's still a major concern in the district. What legislative policies are you putting forth to address?
Thank you for this question. I am now the chair of the newly minted Committee on Youth Affairs. It has oversight of CFSA, Child Family Services Agency, DRS, the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, the Office of the Attorney General, and some smaller agencies. I like to describe it as these are some of the agencies that are engaging with our young people downstream. I like to think our schools and our parks and recreational spaces are dealing with our young people upstream. We want more of our young people in school so they can thrive. What are we doing? But before I answer that first, the status quo. We know that too many of our young people are engaging in crimes of violence. We know too many of our young people are getting their hands on guns. In fact, there's a trend that we're seeing that more young people are committing violent crimes at a time when more adults are turning towards petty crime when you look at crime stats. We know that a young person that has high rates of trauma in their home life, as well as missing significant amounts of school, correlate with a greater likelihood of ending up in our criminal justice system or ending up at DRS. And so that's again why truancy is so important as an issue for us. We also know that more than 50% of our young people that are at DRS end up right back there in terms of recidivism. I'll say it one more time. More than 50% of young people in DRS, after their time is done, they are released, they end up right back. And so that says to me that we are not focused on rehabilitation as a system, but we are focused purely on detention, and it is not working. So, what am I focused on? I will answer this in two ways. One is around deepening the focus on rehabilitation through DRS. We are focused on that through the educational offerings that DRS is providing, as well as the mental health and the behavioral health supports that they're providing young people while they are there in DRS's care. Also, we are beginning to hone in on what is the exit and reentry plan for these young people when they are released from DRS's care. When they are sent back to the communities or the household that often led them to DRS, how are we providing support? Right now, DRS's oversight and custody ends when that young person is released. And I believe there needs to be a greater support even after they leave. And so I hope to share some updates around legislation. But right now, we're trying to work with the agency to see what they can do without necessarily leading by legislating. But those are two broad areas that we're focused on: rehabilitation services while they're in versus care, and then making sure that that support follows that young person well after they leave DRS.
Well, let's stick with young people for a minute and talk about access to quality education and after school programming. With all the looming budget cuts, I guess what is the committee doing to expand that work and expand those benefits to young people in the city?
Great question. Here's my plug. The council should have a standalone committee on education. I said it before, I said it again. We don't currently have a standalone committee on education. It is currently under the committee of the whole. And so I say that to say that while I'm a member of the council and I sit on the committee of the whole, I don't have direct oversight over matters of education or out of school time programming. And it is critical. Young people not only need to be served in school, they need productive opportunities outside of the school to engage in recreational outlets, to stimulate their minds, to learn about themselves. And right now, we don't have nearly enough programs. But more importantly, we don't have equity based programs, meaning if your child has an IEP or has some type of learning difference, they often are not supported in out of school time programs. They often don't have the same access. And we know that there are monetary barriers to access to out of school time programming and educational supports, whether that's tutoring, sports and activities and engagement. And we just need to do a lot more. We spend a lot of money on education here in the district and in this country. And I would argue our outcomes do not match the investment. And so, in fact, I just was having a conversation with the chairman today that I think we need to revolutionize our approach to education in the district while continuing to do the things that we know work. And that starts by refusing to accept the status quo, where only a quarter of our students are proficient. That's unacceptable. And year after year, we spike the football. We say how great our schools are, they're improving. And while, yes, let's acknowledge the ways our schools are growing and improving, but at the current pace that we're going, think about how many young people are going to be failed in our schools that are going to graduate without the necessary foundations in literacy and math to thrive, which then puts them on a direct pathway to DRS. And so when I say transform and revolutionize our education system, I'm talking about revisiting our governance structure. Is the way our schools set up the way it should be? Is it optimal? I don't think so. Thinking about the number of schools that we have, I support school choice. I support parents' right to choose the best education for their child. But I would argue we have too many schools. And as a result, we are seeing schools' budgets slash year after year. Last thing I would say is we need to get serious about what is the standard of excellence and quality in the district. We know many of our young people are passed on to the next grade, whether or not they master the material or not, whether or not they show up to school or not. And that is frankly unacceptable because we're setting up our young people for failure. So that was a long answer. As you can tell, I'm an educator by background, so I get fired up when we start talking about education. But we have a lot of work to do, and it starts with us getting serious and not accepting the status quo. We can celebrate the hard work that our teachers are doing day in and day out, the small gains that our schools are making, while also saying that is not good enough.
What was did you in your conversation with the chairman, was he open to a standalone committee on education?
But he agrees with me on the point that we need to accelerate student learning and do things differently
Yeah.
because the incremental gains are insufficient.
I saw recently you posted on social media that you introduced a bill to increase the authority of the State Board of Education. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
So I used to serve on the state board. I was actually president of the state board before serving on the council. And the State Board of Education is the district's only duly elected educational body. Think about that. This is the only body where people should be experts in education. And the State Board of Education has the statutory authority over graduation requirements, learning standards, attendance policies, and a subset of other things. Right now, the state board can only vote on matters that OSSI bring to them, OSSI being our state education agency. So, as it relates to the statutory authority, they can only vote up or down on matters that OSSI brings to them to engage in. The legislation that I put forth would make two substantial changes. One, the state board would be able to amend policies that OSSI brings, so they not only could vote up or down, but they could actually propose changes. Also, the state board can initiate policy as it relates to their statutory authority. Why does this matter? Why is this necessary? I'll give you two very concrete examples. Years ago, on the State Board of Education, there was a graduation task force chaired by Marcus Batchelor and Laura Phelan. They did over, I would say, almost a year's worth of engagement alongside OSSI, parents, teachers. And OSSI literally took the report and said, thank you, no thank you, and did not move on it. They didn't engage, they didn't follow up. To me, that's unacceptable. I'll give you another example. There has been a desire on the state board to make changes to our DC school report that the state board also has to vote on and approve. Modest changes like making sure there's more information around out of school time programming and specialized programs. The state board doesn't have the authority to bring that proposal forward because only OSSI can do that. The state board can vote up or down. So I think these are common sense changes. I think it would allow the state board to expand its power in a responsible way. And I believe it would make our process a bit more difficult.
Thanks for sharing. So, final question: if you could accomplish one major change for DC in the next 5 years, what would it be?
A more equitable approach to development. And I will say it's something that I'm actively working on. I ran on this platform about building healthy communities because I fundamentally believe we all want the same things, regardless if you live in this city, regardless of your race, your background. We all want the same things, which is generally to be safe, to thrive, to have opportunity, etc. Whatever those fundamental aspects are that would make a healthy community, access to amenities, access to quality schools, green space, you name it, whatever those things are, if we could develop a rubric, a criteria, a framework, and then lay that framework over all areas of this city, from Anacostia to Brooklyn, Brightwood to Petworth, you name it, and say, where do our neighborhoods stack up and let that drive development, I think we would see much more equitable development across the city versus what happens now, which is our neighborhoods are often sold to the highest bidder. Development usually is led by interest and for big money interests. And so that is why we see parts of east of the river that have been lagging behind for decades. And it's only when the big money interests can get a return on their investment that they then turn to east of the river or even parts of Ward 5. So in the next 5 years, I would love to develop and enshrine in law that type of development tool that would ensure that we can all live.
Awesome. Wow, you did a hand clap for me on that one. So, if the general public listening today, if they want to help out with anything that you said today, how would they be able to contact you, your office, to offer any assistance?
You can check out my website, zacharyparkerward5.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. It comes out every week on my website, zacharyparkerward5.com. You can sign up for that newsletter. And I would say roll up your sleeves and get engaged in the work. I don't pretend to have all the answers. And I would say again, the power has always been and always will be with the people. So there will come a time, and I think that time is going to be really soon, where we need to be shoulder to shoulder, pushing back and fighting for the vision of our country, our city that we deserve.
Well, Councilmember Parker, thank you so much for joining us today on Statehood Speaks. You're always welcome back, and so please just let us know, and we'll stay in contact.
Thank you for having me.
And have a great day.
Have a good one.